The Russian Ministry of Defense is claiming that Russia managed to down almost 160 Ukrainian drones and it was the largest drone attack from the beginning of the war. It doesn't mean that all of the drones were down, so it's unclear how many of them successfully hit the targets. And I need to emphasize that this Ukraine's decision to strike drones, to use drones to strike targets on the Russian territory, comes from the restrictions put on Ukraine by its Western allies to use Western-produced weapons to strike Russian territories, and hence Ukraine had to come up with an alternative strategy to somehow bring the damage that Russia has been bringing to Ukraine for the past 10 years onto the Russian territory.
Well, it's been nearly a month since Ukrainian forces swept into Russia's Kursk region. How much territory does Kyiv now control? There are reports hundreds of prisoners of war have been taken.
So until the last day, until yesterday, Ukraine has been advancing slowly in the Kursk region. There were reports that Ukrainian troops are trying to get into the neighboring Belgorod region. Those both regions have a direct border with Ukraine, and so it's in a way easy for Ukraine to try to get through the border to the Russian territory. From the Russian side, we see that Russia is now struggling with finding more troops to bring on those theater campaign, and that it had to bring some troops from Burkina Faso, and that it's redeploying its troops from within the Ukrainian sovereign territory onto the Ukrainian incursion in Kursk region. So as of now, yes, it's over 1,000 square kilometers, if I'm not mistaken, and Ukraine is successfully continuing on to hold the territory that it managed to gain at the very beginning of this incursion.
Well, the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, though, has come under heavy attack, with shopping malls and sporting facilities reportedly hit, even though Russia denies deliberately targeting civilians.
Well, that was the Russian, and that remains the Russian strategy for the past 2.5 years of the full-scale invasion and 10 years of the war in Ukraine, supported by Russia initially. And that's the kind of strategy and tactic Russia has been employing within its past two air-winter campaigns, when it specifically targets civilian infrastructure and infrastructure that helps Ukrainians live throughout the war, in order to push the morale down and in order to kind of force the Ukrainian administration, give up or negotiate with them. That depends on Russia's current political views. But that strategy of striking civilian infrastructure has been pursued by Russia for the past 3 years, and it's likely that in the upcoming winter, Russia will intensify its strikes of civilian infrastructure, again, in order to put the Ukrainian population under more strain to force the country to give up fighting.
Well, Russia's also making advances in eastern Ukraine, in the Donetsk region. How significant are the developments there?
So the city of Pokrovsk is now one of the key points that Russia is fighting for, and that's an important logistics hub for Ukraine. And so we've been observing that for the past several months, Russia has been steadily gaining ground near the city, and it's likely that Russian troops are already next to the city itself. It's unlikely that Russia will manage to gain much of the territory prior to the winter break, and so it will depend a lot on if Ukraine get more support from its international allies, and with what restrictions this support will come. Because if the Western allies provide Ukraine with support that would come with similar restrictions that Ukraine now has, for example, that it cannot strike Russian targets on the Russian territory, then of course it will significantly impact the ability of Ukraine to fight, and also the the Russian advances in the Donbas region.
Do you think this is a critical juncture in this lengthy conflict?
It is a critical juncture because for the first time, Ukrainian troops are officially on the Russian territory. That has never happened before, and similar raids in the previous 2 years were made by the Russian troops that were fighting on the Ukrainian side. So for the first time throughout the 2.5 years of a full-scale invasion, Ukraine is occupying the Russian territory. And of course, it gives a lot of military advantage to Ukraine, but also gives a lot of political advantage to Ukraine. So I think this is a demonstration that the Western allies should double down on supporting Ukraine, and it's better to do now than risking Russia pushing back of Ukrainian troops and risking more Ukrainian casualties in order to wait for, I don't know what else Ukraine needs to do to prove its ability to fight.
Well, just lastly and very quickly too, the President has called for Western allies to give Ukraine everything it needs to defend itself. So what is Volodymyr Zelensky calling for?
The most important is air defense at the moment. As I said, it's likely that Russia will intensify its air campaign in the upcoming winter. So being able to protect civilian infrastructure, being able to protect civilians is very important. And there also there is a need of a steady supply of ammunition to be able to strike Russian targets in the territory of Ukraine that Russia occupies, but also on the territory of Russia itself.
Sasha Oster, Nina, thank you so much for talking to us. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me.